Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 162 of the Extra Mile podcast. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I'm so glad you're with us today. We've got a lot planned to share with you in today's episode. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you're a returning podcast watcher or listener, we're glad to have you back. And as always, I want to just let everybody know that you can get today's episode a couple of different ways. You can listen using Apple iTunes or iHeartRadio. Or if you prefer to watch the video of today's episode, go to celebrationbarreview.com/162, and you can watch the entire episode. Now, if you'd like to go back and check out our prior episodes, you can also do that. We've got a spot on our website at celebrationbarreview.com. You'll see a tab at the top of the page for podcasts. Just go back there and check. You'll find all the old episodes and the show notes. So we invite you to check that out. There's a lot of great content there. And as always, I invite you to share this content with friends, colleagues, others that you think might be interested if this is material that you want to share and pass along. We'd really appreciate it if you did that. Well, there is a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in the bar exam. I had planned to continue with our exam piece series in today's episode, but obviously the results of the last couple of weeks as this episode comes out, the Hurricane Harvey, and I don't know, by the time this releases, we may be looking at Hurricane Irma too. So there's a lot going on. And I decided to do a special message to my students called When Studying for the Bar Exam Feels Selfish. And I wanted to share that with you today. So that's going to be our message for today. We'll get to that in just a minute, and I hope you'll stick around for that. I think it's a timely and probably pretty important discussion to have. Now, there's a couple of other things going on that I do want to alert everybody to. First of all, we do have bar exam results starting to come out, and in a moment I'm going to go down the list of what we expect in terms of jurisdictions releasing results in late August or early September. I also want to invite all of you who are taking the bar exam in 2018 to join me this Thursday, that's September 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern for our special webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. It's the powerful, proven way to pass. We're going to look at the steps you have to take in order to pass your bar exam. We're going to look at case studies. We're going to dive deep into the specific things you need to do to pass your bar exam. So I hope you'll join me for that. It's Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, that's 12 noon Pacific. You can register for this class, this webinar, in a couple of ways. By going to our homepage, you'll see a button right at the top that says Claim My Spot. Just click there and we'll get you registered. Or if you're watching today's episode, just scroll down on the page and you'll see the video button there. Click on that and you'll be all set to go. Get you registered and set up for 3 p.m. Thursday Eastern. And hope you'll join us for that. It's a great session and really filled with information you can use right away. Now, I also want to let you know about something we've been doing kind of beta quietly, but I'm ready to announce it a little more publicly. And that is that for the last few weeks, I've been doing a Facebook Live presentation on Saturdays at 12 noon Eastern. And we do that on our Facebook page, Celebration Bar Review. So you can go to Facebook and then /Celebration Bar Review, and that'll put you on the page. And at 12 noon Eastern, I've been coming on and doing about a half-hour Facebook Live presentation, and I'd love to have you join me for that. Obviously, there's no charge. It's timely material, and we can stay a little more current that way. Certainly, as results are coming out, it's a great way to talk about results, get your feedback, and engage you in that Facebook Live presentation. So make sure you check us out, Celebration Bar Review on Facebook. Saturday, we'll be there the 9th at 12 noon Eastern Time. So a couple of announcements there, ways that you can stay in touch with us. Now, I want to talk a little bit about exam results starting to come out. We don't have numbers anywhere yet, but we do have some early indications about exam dates and release dates. And so I thought what I'd do is just go down the list of states that we expect to release results in September so that you would have some basic idea. Alabama should be releasing mid to late September. We should have Arkansas results in early September. Connecticut will release on September 29th. Florida, big jurisdiction, one of the first big jurisdictions, will release on Monday, September 18th. We'll have a lot to say about that, I'm sure. Idaho will release on September 13th. We expect Iowa mid-September, and a lot of times we don't know exact dates. We just got an approximation here. Kansas may have already released. It's usually the first week of September, so by the time this podcast episode comes out, they probably will have released their results in Kansas. That's a UBE jurisdiction, by the way. Kentucky should release at the end of September. We expect Mississippi to release in mid-September, and then Missouri will release on September 13th. Missouri, again, is a UBE jurisdiction. Montana should release on September 11th, another UBE, and Nebraska should release in early September. It's never an exact date with Nebraska, but I'm guessing probably about the time of this podcast releasing, those results should be out in Nebraska. They're also a UBE jurisdiction. Another UBE jurisdiction is New Hampshire. That should come out in late September. And New Mexico, also UBE in mid-September. North Dakota, early September, also UBE. Oregon just switched to the UBE. We expect those results in, they're saying early September, but I'm guessing it's more like mid to later in the month. Let's see what else we have. South Dakota, September 8th. We have Utah, UBE jurisdiction is in late September. And we have Washington State, UBE, September 8th. West Virginia, UBE jurisdiction for the first time, probably has released by the time this podcast episode comes out. Wisconsin should have also released by the time this episode comes out. And that should bring us up to date. So as we begin to get results, probably in the next episode or two, we'll be talking about that with all of you. Well, I want to jump into today's message, but first I wanted to give you just a bit of context. Obviously, with everything that happened with Hurricane Harvey and all of the things going on just generally in the world, it is really difficult for bar takers sometimes to stay focused and balanced between their bar study and what's going on around them. And I wanted to address that very real concern, and maybe that still is a part of Exam Peace. In any event, I wanted to make sure that we gave you some specific ways that you might be able to manage and cope with that. And then at the end of that message, I actually shared an appeal for help from a dear friend of mine who is a school superintendent in the city of Houston. They've had a tremendous loss there, including loss of student lives. And we wanted to provide a tangible way for people to reach out and contribute if they're so inclined. So I hope you'll stick around for that message. We'll put a link on our show notes and on our video page. So if you'd like to contribute to this particular school district, we've got a way for you to do that. And I hope you'll do that and show your support for the victims of Hurricane Harvey. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into today's message about when studying for the bar feels selfish. We are coming up on this weekend, and I wanted to share a message with you. I had something in mind to talk about today, and then in the way that sometimes the world works, you just go, yeah, that's not the right message. I think I need to talk about something different. So I hope you'll humor me. What I want to talk about today, I titled, When Studying for the Bar Exam Feels Selfish. Yeah, when it feels selfish. You know, keeping perspective during crisis, during the bigger things of the world is really hard to do. I remember vividly a little more than a year ago being here in Orlando when the Pulse nightclub shootings happened, and it was right before the bar exam. And I remember how devastatingly difficult it was, particularly for our students here in Central Florida who were getting ready for the bar, some of whom knew people that were in the Pulse nightclub or had acquaintances or certainly were familiar with the city and that area. It was incredibly difficult for those individuals at that moment to keep their focus and to study. And frankly, there was a little bit of what I would describe as survivor's guilt because, well, here I am studying for the bar, but there's all this stuff going on. Now, obviously, what prompts me to talk about this today is the extraordinary devastation in Texas with Hurricane Harvey. This is something I talk about at a pretty deep personal level. Those of you that know anything about my story and Sarah's story may know that prior to Hurricane Katrina, Sarah and I had business interests in the city of New Orleans. We owned coffee shops, and our coffee roasting facility was in the warehouse district. When Katrina hit, we were actually in the line of the path of the storm. We escaped personally from the storm, only to see it literally wipe out our businesses and the city of New Orleans. After that period of time, we actually relocated into New Orleans, into the city, and we participated in the emotional and physical rebuilding of the city and of being part of the recreation of that great and amazing city. And so when I think about Katrina and what happened, I don't think of it as an event of 2 or 3 days. If you go to New Orleans today, there are still major sections of that area that look like the storm just hit. These kinds of problems do not get resolved, as you undoubtedly know and have heard. They don't get fixed overnight. They don't happen quickly. There won't be an immediate solution in Houston or in Texas. It may take a generation to return things to what we would think of as normal. Now, my point in talking about this today is to identify that for you who are taking the bar exam, this presents a real, and I think it is a very real challenge and a very real concern. I don't think you can look at everything that's going on and say, I don't care. I mean, I don't really think those are the kinds of people we have in our course, or generally the kinds of people that choose to go into law, in spite of what people think about lawyers. You know, lawyers are often the first responders now. How amazing is that? How different is that than it used to be? But my point is that right now you may be feeling a little conflicted, maybe a lot conflicted about what's going on as you think about Harvey. I know that I felt that way as we were doing the bar review business during Katrina and post-Katrina. I felt that way during the Pulse shootings and at other times, and I certainly feel that right now. I think that ultimately what this comes down to are two things: bandwidth and timing. When you're studying for the bar right now, you have a finite capacity when it comes to bandwidth, and you have a finite capacity when it comes to timing. There's only so much of both that you can devote. And so I want to offer some concrete suggestions about what you can do to manage your bandwidth and manage your timing in dealing with these big national disasters. And, you know, we're talking about Harvey, but it could be any number of other things. There's another big storm out in the Atlantic right now as I'm talking. There are obviously things going on around the world that are significant. And you might be sitting in California saying, well, we don't get hurricanes. Yeah, you get wildfires, or you might be in the Midwest and you get tornadoes, or you might be someplace where there are earthquakes. I mean, nobody's immune to this. It all happens all the time. So I want to offer several ideas here that perhaps will help you. The first is that to the extent that you are capable and able to do so, I would suggest that you be willing to offer your time and your talent to people that need the help right now. That is to say, I would like you to be proactive rather than reactive. You know, you're studying for the bar, and that's really, really, really important because it only happens a couple of times a year. It's a game changer. It's a gatekeeper, and you can only do so much. But it does not take you off the hook from being able to offer time and talent. And there's lots of different ways to offer your time and your talent. It doesn't mean physically packing up and moving into Texas and helping distribute supplies. I mean, if you're there and you can do that, that would be great. But for most of us, it's really not so much about that. It's more about being proactive about what we can do to assist the people that we know. And most of us have some contact, some relationship to what's going on. And I'm going to suggest something at the end of here today that might allow you to do that in some way. But I don't want you to take the position that you simply don't want to know, don't care, and you don't want to be informed or bothered by what's going on out there. And I don't think those are the terms that most people would use, but I think there is this disconnect that we say, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. Well, you can't do everything, but you may be able to do something. And to the extent that you can do something, go ahead and do that. Be proactive about it. Can you help out through your church or through a community organization or through your school, or offer some way of assisting? Maybe you've got some clothes that you could pack up and ship to Houston to help people who need clothes, or blankets or something else. It doesn't have to be big items of service, but just some item of service. Now, why do I say to do that, besides the fact that it would help the recipient? I say it because it actually becomes a relief to you. It means that you're able to say, you know what, I'm aware that this is going on, and here's how I'm able to help. Maybe not a big deal. Maybe nobody else knows about it. It's just something that you can do. And once you've done it, I think it kind of clears the mental and emotional decks to allow you to then go back to your studies. So I would just encourage you to think about it. How could you offer your time, your talent, maybe some of your possessions to those who are in need? In the same way, my second suggestion is be compassionate. Be compassionate. You know, one of the things that makes me nuts about bar takers is how incredibly self-absorbed and selfish we can be. That we think that the entire world is interested in our bar exam because it's so incredibly big to us. We just assume that it's incredibly big and important to everybody else, and we lose all sense of proportion. This is sort of the, blowing up at the barista because they don't make your coffee just the way you wanted it, or being unhappy with the hotel clerk because your room at the bar isn't exactly what you wanted, or whatever it might be. There's just sort of this sense of entitlement that comes. Well, in times like these, I think you have to be compassionate. I think you have to demonstrate some compassion, and it might not necessarily be to someone who is a victim of these natural disasters. Maybe it's just being compassionate to the people that are around you who are concerned about them. The point is that when you become so self-absorbed about the bar that you simply put up these walls and you say, oh, I don't care. I mean, so there's a big storm. Those stupid people, why did they live in a place that would flood? It's not very compassionate. It's not a very good habit to get into. You know, the best lawyers that I've ever seen, they could be tough as nails, but I'll tell you something, they're compassionate. They care about their clients. They care about what they're doing. They care about the rule of law. And if you take that approach, I think you're going to be a much better bar taker and a much better lawyer. And it's just good for you. It's good to kind of sort of clean out your heart and your soul by being compassionate. So if you feel like you don't want to be compassionate because nobody understands, yeah, there's all that stuff going on in Texas, but I've got to take the bar exam. What an inconvenience this is, right? Really? To everybody else in the world, nobody cares about the bar exam except you. And so I think this is a moment when perspective really plays a role. And so I would just encourage you to be compassionate. The third thing I would tell you at these moments is to keep your focus and stay balanced. And what I mean by that is that some people become self-centered at these moments, but other people go entirely the opposite direction. They become so concerned with everybody else. They become so wrought up in what's happening that they can't turn off the television. They can't turn off their Twitter feed. They can't turn off their Facebook feed, and they become consumed by it. Listen, I've been through, I don't know, I was trying to count up how many hurricanes Sarah and I have been through. I think it's more than 10. Between South Florida and the Gulf Coast. It's a lot. And when that hurricane is out in the Gulf or the Atlantic and it's bearing down on you, it is hard to do anything except watch that swirling thing moving at you. I've been in Southern California when there were forest fires, and I've watched the fire come out of the mountains, and you're consumed. You just sort of sit there and go, oh. But here's the thing. If you're not directly in the path of the storm, whatever the storm might be, keep your focus and stay balanced. Continue to spend 5 or 10 hours a week in studying for the bar. Spend some time being aware of what's going on with these natural disasters, contributing something in the sense of time and talent, being compassionate, but don't go overboard. Don't be all about that and saying, well, you know, there was the hurricane in Texas, and so I didn't do any studying for a month. Oh, really? Were you in Texas? No, but I had some family there. Okay, I get that. I totally get it. When Katrina hit, I totally get it. But you know what? You got to stay balanced. You got to do a little bit of both. Now, look, if you're in Texas or you've got family in Texas, I understand that's going to be really tough. You know, right before the last bar exam, we had a student who contacted me and said, my I think it was his fiance's mother, is in hospice care. And the doctors have said that she's probably going to pass away over this weekend. And this was the weekend right before the bar exam. And the students said, I'm thinking maybe I'll just stay away from hospice, and I won't go to the funeral. I won't, because I'm studying for the bar. And my advice to that student was, you know what, 5 years, 10 years from now, no one will remember what happened on the bar, but your fiance will remember that you weren't at the funeral and that you weren't there with her mother. And that's really bad priorities. You got to stay balanced. You can give up a couple of hours for these things. Long story short, the student went to the hospice, went to the funeral, and wrote back to me and said, you know what, I'm really glad I did that. It really didn't impact my studies all that much, but it made a world of difference to the people around me. As you study in the midst of these natural disasters, whether it's something like the Pulse shooting, man-made, or it's something of nature, you've got to stay balanced. You've got to keep your focus. When it's time to study for the bar, set your clock for an hour and study for an hour or 55 minutes, and then take 5 or 10 minutes and check in on the world and see what's going on, and then come back to your studies. Do that as you can. I call it sacred time. Make your study time sacred. Make your work time sacred, make your family time sacred, make your Twitter time sacred if that's important to you. But during those times, stay focused on what's in front of you. Don't try to multitask through all of these things. When you do that, you're going to do badly at your bar study, and you're going to be really just making people angry around you because you're not really engaged in what they're doing either. And so there's this need to stay balanced all the way through. Next item is to remember the big picture, the long game, if you will. Look, I said earlier, lawyers as first responders, that's unbelievable to me, but we've seen it happen now over and over and over again. Lawyers were the first responders at the airports when the Muslim travel ban went in. Lawyers have been the first responders in all manner of events and things that have been going on. And lawyers are first responders in Texas as well. But here's what I mean by the long game. If you're studying for the bar exam, by definition, I'm going to assume you are not a member of the Texas Bar. There's very few of you that are members of the Texas Bar. As a result, you can't play. There is very little need for your services as a lawyer because you're not a lawyer yet. Your job, your task right now is to pass the bar so that when the next thing happens, you're in a position to be a first responder. And I hope that's your intuition. I hope that that's your desire to be a first responder. It's an awesome thing to do. But here's the truth. You can't play in this game. And so if you get so focused that you say, oh, I should be in Texas doing something. No, you shouldn't. You're not a member of the Texas Bar or a bar that's allowed to go in and practice. Now, if you are a member of another bar and they've said, in Texas, we'll let you come in and help out pro bono, maybe you should consider doing that for a week or a few days or whatever it might be. But for the vast majority of you listening to this message, you're just not there yet. Your job is to get there. And you can't get there unless you do the work. So in a sense, I'm giving you permission to be a little selfish. You've got to do first things first. The first thing for you is to pass the bar. Then you can go be a kind and gentle and compassionate member of our profession, I hope. But for right now, if you're thinking, well, I can't study because I really got to go and help out in Texas, well, no, you can't. I mean, you really can't. So that's where we are. Now, I said at the very beginning of this that I thought it was important to contribute something, to offer time and talent, but I want to give you something that's concrete that you can do right now. June's going to put up an item on your display, which is an opportunity to contribute to a very specific cause in Texas, in Houston. Many of you know that here in Celebration, I was part of the Celebration School for over a decade. One of my colleagues there moved from teaching into administration, became a vice principal, and then moved on to become an assistant superintendent of schools, and then ultimately became the superintendent of schools in an inner city school district in Houston, Texas. His name is Scott Murray. Scott is a very dear friend of mine. He is an incredibly compassionate, warm, caring Christian man who has devoted his entire life to his students. Scott reached out to some of his former colleagues over the last couple of days to point out that his school district, which has 35,000 students, all of whom are really desperately poor, are going to be in extraordinary need right now. And Scott recorded a very short video message. It's a minute long. And June, if you would put that video message up, I would like you to run that, and then I'll come back and wrap up. But I'd like you to hear what Scott Murray said from Houston. So June, would you go ahead and run that?
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues from around the country. My name is Scott Murray, and I'm very proud to be the superintendent in Spring Branch ISD, a district of 35,000 students located here in the heart of Houston, Texas. As you can see from behind me, we've suffered, thanks to Hurricane Harvey, a pretty significant loss. We have students and families in our community. We have teachers and principals and cafeteria workers and bus drivers that have suffered extraordinary loss, some the loss of life, some the loss of their homes, the loss of clothing and food and shelter, and there's a significant need in our community. And so on behalf of our district and on behalf of the city of Houston, we have started a fundraising campaign to assist the families in most dire need in our community. This is day 5 of the hurricane, and as you can see from behind me, the water is still high. So the hurt and pain in our city is great and will continue for many months to come. So anything that you can do as a local community, as a school, or as an individual would be greatly appreciated. And on behalf of the 35,000 students and 4,600 employees of Spring Branch ISD, I say thank you.
It's stunning when you look at the water behind Scott. So what we've done is on your screen, there is a link for you to contribute to this particular group. There are plenty of places to contribute to, but this group I know is going to be taking the money and using it directly for students, and I hope you do that. In addition, there is a match for every dollar that you contribute. So whether it's $1 or $5 or $10, there's the opportunity to match, and we hope you'll take advantage of that. It's through a reputable funding source. My point in all of this is simply that it's a way that you can do something. And that may not be enough to make you feel really great about all of it, but it'll let you know that you've got a bigger picture out there and there's something that you can be part of. So I do hope that you'll find a way to contribute in some way. Here is one way. Certainly there are others. But ultimately what I want to say in wrapping up is that when studying for the bar exam feels selfish, well, sometimes it is selfish, but right now it's not so much selfish as it is balancing out the different perspectives and recognizing what it is that you have to be doing. And if you keep that balance, you really got a great opportunity to move forward and ultimately make a difference. Well, that's our message for today. I don't think anybody can look at that message from Scott Murray and not be touched by it. A quick postscript is that there were, in fact, a significant loss of lives among Scott's students and faculty and staff. The needs are really incredible all around Texas, but certainly in inner city Houston, it's pretty substantial. So I hope you'll help out that organization. But obviously there are plenty of great groups doing wonderful work throughout the flood-stricken areas, and we hope you'll contribute and participate in some way with the organizations of your choice. Well, we'll be back again next week. Bar results should start to be filtering out. We'll try and be recording pretty close to the date so we can give you that information. But if you want the very latest, remember that our Facebook Live, Saturday, September 9th, 12 noon Eastern at Celebration Bar Review. So you just go to Facebook/Celebration Bar Review. I'll be there live and talking with you. And then on Thursday, September 7th, our free webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam, 3 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. You can register on our homepage. Well, with that, I hope you all have a great week and that everything goes well for you. Look forward to seeing you along the extra mile and on the pass list in the very near future. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.